Alright, take two. After I just inhaled water from my, or coffee rather. So anyhow, good afternoon everybody. So once again, supposed to have an interview, they canceled. I know, when it rains it fucking pours. And yeah, that's a good title for this video. And of course, my student loan interest is going to start to accrue. Just to be clear, I'm not trying to complain about it or whatever. I made the choice to sign the dotted line, okay? So no need to give me any heat. I'm not one of those whining students or whatever, or one of those people that, I'm not paying the back, I have a habit of speaking out against those people. So anyhow, let's just get into this. But again, when it rains it pours. You got the current situation I'm at. In between jobs, not making as much money on unemployment. And I think it's set up that way, just to get people off of it. But what they don't realize is that people have expenses. I mean, if I didn't get my tracker, I'd still have that car note that I have to make. And that's and that's the thing, because I'm probably in that position where I may have to choose between rent and a car payment. Now obviously, for me, this wasn't my intent, and I just want to make that clear. It wasn't my intent to get the tracker to have as a backup vehicle just in case. If I was that worried about it, I would have kept my old truck as the backup. You can see that playlist. There's only like 5 or 6 videos on that. But anyhow, in some ways I might actually have been smart to pick up that tracker. You can agree or disagree with me. If heaven forbid I end up on some repo guy's YouTube channel, at least I'll have some means to get back and forth. And side note, it is at the tire shop. It's getting the U-joints done eventually. Keep in mind, with older vehicles, they're hard to find parts for. So I end up having to do half the repair shop's work for them. But anyhow, enough about that. I'll give an updated video on that. As soon as I hear from the tire shop. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. I'm not putting all my eggs in a basket. But that's the thing, and a lot of people are facing the situation. We very well could be living in a third world country, and we're heading that way. We have the uber rich, and then you have the rest of us. And again, this isn't one of those doom or gloom videos. And every time they raise minimum wage for places, everything else goes up with it. All the necessities. Now, I'm not going to get into the cost of a new car or anything like that. That's probably just a whole separate ballgame in of itself. But I mentioned this in my previous videos. Things are just becoming disposable now. I'm not going to regurgitate those. I know those don't get much views. In fact, I don't think any of my room videos get much views anyways, compared to my Santa Cruz playlist and my tracker playlist. Maybe a couple of these. I haven't heard from Warren Earth in a little while. I hope he's doing well. He's worse off than I am, but I too could end up like that. Nothing is guaranteed. You just got to make the most out of what you're doing. And if you saw my shorts video, you'll see that you know, I'm using that makeshift like GoPro head mount camera, you know. If I can pick up a body cam for 18 bucks on eBay and found a like a headband type of thing, just cleaned it off, so it's frig it. 18 bucks, it does what I need it to do. You know, I can't edit videos in this, but you know, it's just a fucking body cam, so that's that. You know, well, I do have the you know, ads on Craigslist, but let me talk more about the Patreon. They say it's a crowdsourcing. Is that anything like GoFundMe or GiveSendGo or whatever? You know, if it is, then I'm probably just going to close it out. You know, because again, you know, I don't feel right sitting there begging for money just because, you know, my situation. You know, I hope it doesn't ever get to that point, but you know, right now I just don't feel right turning my current situation into a fundraiser. That's just not me, you know. You know, that's why I said that, you know, I'm not trying to be a big YouTuber or whatever. You know, if my channel blows up, great. If not, so be it. Still in the job hunt. But, you know, again, you know, when it rains, it pours. You know, when shit hits the fan, it's going to hit it all at once. And, you know, any one of us, and you know, including the people sitting in their cars right here, it could happen to any one of them, including the police officer. You know, who I suspect is A, here just to keep the peace, or B, chillaxing, which keeping the peace is probably a bonus. I mean, nobody's going to do anything stupid when they see a cop car, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, so I like to come here and just, you know, empty out my thoughts, talk to the internet, and, you know, I'm not going to lie, I do like doing videos. I like being anonymous in my videos, I mean, because that's just me. I mean, if you really watch my videos, you'll see what I look like, okay? You know, I'm not exactly a Chad, you know, but, you know, whatever, you know, I'm me. I can't escape that. No matter how hard I try, I just can't escape that. You know, work with the cards that you dealt with. You know, if I find a side hustle, I find a side hustle. And I know, you know, while I do have the tracker, you know, and the Santa Cruz for sale, I actually got a hit in the Santa Cruz, ironically, but, you know, I'm not sure how that would work. You know, and I did chat with the guy. He seemed pretty cool, but obviously he couldn't agree to my number. You know, because I was just trying to get out of a damn fucking car note, but, you know, in order to get out of the car note, especially if you're upside down, you know, he broke it down to me that, you know, I asked for $33K for it, which was just over what the car note is. You know, he said at the time he'd only be able to offer me 26K for it, as it was. And it's like, okay, so that meant if I were to sell the cruise for him, I'd have to give him money. You know, we'll go with 26, I give him 7K, I no longer have the car note, and he can sell it. Now, unfortunately, I don't have 7K right now to do that, but, you know, I mean, that is an option. You know, that's a lot better than a involuntary or a voluntary repossession. You know, though, then again, you know, if you ever get to that point, you know, I'll probably just stop giving a shit about my credit. I never really did give a shit about my credit, to be honest. You know, the only reason I ended up having to get the cruise, and I've said this before, was, you know, my old truck was fucking rotted to shit, looking like Swiss cheese underneath. And so it was more of a need, not really a want. The GPS is nice, though. I mean, sure, you've seen my videos, it's not as accurate in some areas like Google Maps would be, but, you know, it works in areas where Google Maps or a mapping app won't. And that could be because my phone's a piece of shit too, you know, but, you know, anyhow, here I am, just at the park, just chilling.